The words hit me like a blade straight through the chest. I stood frozen in the middle of our living room, the late afternoon light slanting through the tall windows of the house we had chosen together, the house where I had once believed our forever would unfold. My husband, the man I had loved with every quiet corner of my heart, looked at me without a single tremor of regret and said, "Evelyn is back, so leave." Just like that. No soft preamble. No apology. No space for the years I had poured into him. "Evelyn is back, so leave." The sentence hung in the air between us, sharp and final, and something inside me cracked so completely that I could almost hear the sound. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet strength it takes to walk away from what no longer holds you, then please take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Your support keeps stories like this alive. I had met him when I was 24, still carrying the soft edges of someone who believed love could rewrite any story. He was older, already building a name in the tech world, charismatic in that effortless way that made people lean closer when he spoke. I was the junior designer at the firm that handled his company's branding. He noticed the way I stayed late to fix details no one else cared about. He asked me for coffee. Then dinner. Then a weekend away that turned into a life. We married 2 years later under string lights in a garden, and I thought the hardest part was over. I thought the vows would protect us. For 5 years I built my days around his. I left my own small design studio when his company expanded and he needed someone he trusted at home. I hosted dinners for investors. I remembered birthdays of people I barely knew. I learned to smile when his phone lit up at midnight with work that always seemed more urgent than sleep. I told myself this was partnership. I told myself love meant making room. What I did not know was that the room I kept clearing had once belonged to someone else, and that someone was waiting to walk back in. Evelyn. I had heard the name only once, early on, in a conversation that ended too quickly. An old flame from college, he had said. Ancient history. I believed him because I wanted to. Because the alternative was too painful to hold. But history, it turned out, was not finished with either of us. The day she returned began like any other. I had spent the morning arranging flowers for a charity event he was sponsoring. The house smelled of lilies and fresh coffee. When he walked through the door that afternoon, his face was different. Not angry. Not sad. Resolved. He set his keys on the counter with deliberate care, as if the sound itself needed to be measured. Then he looked at me and spoke those words. "Evelyn is back, so leave." I asked him what he meant. My voice did not shake at first. I still thought there might be an explanation that would let us stay standing. He told me she had called. She was divorced now. She had never stopped thinking of him. He had never stopped thinking of her. The marriage we shared had been a long interruption, he said, not the main story. He needed me to understand. He needed me to go quietly so he could begin again with the woman who had always been his true north. I remember the way the light shifted across the floor as the sun moved lower. I remember the exact pattern of the rug under my feet. I remember thinking that if I just stayed very still, the moment might pass without taking everything with it. But it did not pass. He had already made the decision. My presence was an inconvenience he no longer wished to manage. That night I slept in the guest room for the first time. The bed felt too large and too empty. I lay awake listening to the quiet of a house that no longer belonged to me. In the morning I began to pack. Not everything at once. Just the things that were clearly mine. Clothes. Books. The framed photographs of us that suddenly looked like evidence of a life I had imagined rather than lived. He did not help. He did not hinder. He simply existed in the same space as if I were already a ghost. The divorce was swift. He had the better lawyers. He had the clearer story. I was the woman who had known, somehow, that she was temporary. I signed the papers in a cold conference room while rain tapped against the windows. When it was over, I walked out with a check that felt like payment for silence and a heart that felt scraped hollow. I moved into a small apartment across the city, a place with thin walls and a view of a brick building. At night I could hear the neighbors laughing. Their ordinary happiness felt like a language I no longer spoke. The first months were a blur of survival. I took freelance design work. I learned to cook for one. I cried in the shower so the sound would not escape. Friends offered sympathy that eventually thinned into polite distance. No one knew what to say to a woman whose husband had chosen his past over the present she had built with him. I stopped telling the story. It hurt too much to watch people's faces change when they heard it. I met him by accident. Or perhaps by the quiet insistence of a universe that had decided I had suffered enough. His name was Adrian Cole. He was the founder of the company that had spent years competing with my ex-husband's firm. They were rivals in the purest sense, two men who had built empires on opposite sides of the same industry, each measuring success by the other's setbacks. I knew of him only through headlines and the occasional muttered frustration across the dinner table in the years when I still shared that table. I had never expected to stand in the same room with him. It happened at a design conference I attended for work. I was presenting a portfolio for a client who wanted something modern and clean. Adrian was there as a keynote speaker. After the panels, during the crowded reception, I stepped outside for air and found myself on a quiet terrace overlooking the city lights. He was already there, leaning against the railing, phone in hand but not looking at it. When he glanced up, recognition flickered across his face. Not of me as a person, but of the connection. He knew who I had been married to. Everyone in that circle did. I expected distance. Perhaps even coldness. Instead he asked if I was all right. The question was simple, but the way he asked it held something genuine. I told him I was fine, the automatic answer. He did not accept it. He waited. And in that waiting I felt something I had not felt in a long time, the possibility that another human being might actually see me rather than the story attached to me. We talked for nearly an hour. Not about the divorce. Not about rivalry. About design. About the way light changes a space. About cities we had both loved and left. When the evening ended he handed me his card and said if I ever wanted to discuss a project, or simply talk, the invitation stood. I put the card in my bag and tried not to think about it. I failed. A week later I called. We met for coffee. Then lunch. Then long walks along the river when the weather turned colder. He never pushed. He never asked for details I was not ready to give. He simply showed up, consistently, with a steadiness that felt foreign after years of being someone else's afterthought. I learned that his reputation as a ruthless competitor was only half the truth. The other half was a man who had built his company from nothing after losing nearly everything in his 20s, a man who understood what it meant to start over when the ground beneath you had disappeared. The first time he kissed me it was raining. We were standing under the awning of a small bookstore, waiting for the downpour to ease. He looked at me the way no one had in a very long time, as if I were not a complication or a temporary solution but the only thing in the frame that mattered. When his lips met mine the world did not shift in some dramatic cinematic way. It simply became quieter. Safer. Real. But nothing worth having arrives without cost. Word traveled. My ex-husband learned that I was seeing Adrian. The reaction was swift and ugly. He called me, something he had not done since the divorce papers were signed. His voice carried the sharp edge of wounded pride. He told me I was making a spectacle of myself. He told me Adrian was using me to get under his skin. He told me Evelyn had been right about me all along. I listened until the words ran out, then I hung up. For the first time in years I did not feel the need to explain myself to him. Adrian never asked me to choose sides. He never used me as a weapon in the long Cold War between their companies. When the press began to speculate, when photographs of us together appeared online with captions that reduced our relationship to a revenge plot, he issued a single quiet statement: the only story that mattered was the one we were writing together. Then he went back to work and left the noise to burn itself out. There were harder days. Days when the old loneliness rose up without warning. Days when I walked past our former house and felt the ghost of the woman I had been still standing at the window. Days when Evelyn's name appeared in industry articles beside my ex-husband's and I had to remind myself that their story was no longer mine to carry. On those days Adrian did not try to fix me. He simply stayed. He cooked dinner. He played old records. He let silence be enough. A year after the divorce I stood in a small courtroom again, this time to marry the man who had chosen me without hesitation, without conditions, without the shadow of someone else waiting in the wings. There was no grand garden, no string lights, no audience of investors. Just the two of us, a judge, and the quiet certainty that this time the vows meant what they said. When he placed the ring on my finger his hands were steady. When he looked at me I saw no calculation, no comparison, no half-measure. Only the clear decision of a man who had looked at every possible path and still chosen the one that led to me. We built a different kind of life. Not perfect. Not free of the scars the past had left. But honest. We worked late sometimes, but we also left work early when the light was good and the river called. We argued about ordinary things and then found our way back. We learned each other's silences. We made a home that felt like shelter rather than performance. One evening, years later, I received a letter. Not from my ex-husband. From Evelyn. She wrote that she had heard about the wedding. She wrote that she was sorry for the way things had unfolded. She wrote that she had believed she was reclaiming something that belonged to her, only to discover that what she had taken was already broken. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and put it away. Some apologies arrive too late to change the past. They can only be accepted as evidence that the past is finally finished. I still think of that afternoon in the living room, the moment the world I knew ended with 6 cold words. I think of the woman who packed her bags in silence and walked out into a future she could not yet imagine. I think of the long stretch of loneliness that followed, and the slow, careful way another person taught her that she was not disposable. I think of the quiet strength it took to stop waiting for someone to choose her and start choosing herself instead. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of your own quiet battles or the second chances that sometimes arrive when the first ones fail, then I ask you, from the deepest part of whatever still believes in kindness, to like this video, leave a comment sharing what stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so that more stories like this can reach the people who need them most. And before the ending, please do one special thing for me. In the comments below, write the name of someone who once chose you when the world made it easy not to, or write the word, enough, if you are still learning to choose yourself. Let this space hold the proof that we are not alone in the long work of becoming whole. The years have softened the sharpest edges of that old pain. Some nights, when the city lights glitter beyond the windows of the home I share with the man who never asked me to leave, I still feel the faint echo of the moment everything broke. But the echo no longer defines me. It is only the sound of a door that closed so that another, better one could open. And on the other side of that door stands a life built not on someone else's return, but on the quiet, stubborn decision to stay for the person who stayed for me.